so often the case that where you see an organisation that's doing fantastically, that when you try and dig and say, why are you good? Why are you better than others? It's because something absolutely awful happened and somebody said, that's not going to happen again. And in that field of work, in order to be both a regulator or an advocate or a proponent or an enthusiast, you learn to see losses and victories differently. And you learn to see that if you're to make any ground, you've got to embrace every bit of failure and use it for improvement. And it's that broader context in which I see this regulatory job. At its basis, our job is to make sure that we learn from mistakes. And when we don't do our job, and we don't learn from mistakes, that is just completely unacceptable. Now, I know it's tough. It's difficult work, but that's our job. And yes, as Suzuki says, the victories are temporary. There's a lot lacking in the victories that we get. They're not that resilient. You've got to keep at it and at it and at it. And if you're not up to it, you're in the wrong business. But the losses are also temporary, in my view, or at least some of them are. And they are in particular if you make them so. And so that's, I suppose, a bit of context for how I see the work. I know Suzuki's comments are framed in terms of the environmental movement, and we're different to that. We're part of that mainstream and that regulatory arm. But it is that capacity to embrace and see through things and see what part we all play. And when I've talked and listened to groups about what they want from the EPA and what they need it to be, the overwhelming message I get is, please just do your job. Because if you don't do your job, none of us can do ours. And we are, as I say, I think doomed to repeat those problems of the past. So with that a bit of context, let's have a look at some of the issues that we're dealing with, and in particular, I suppose, some of the victories. I'm lucky enough to be at the EPA at a time when the air quality, for which I feel accountable, is the best it's been for a long, long time, probably in 20 or 30 years. Now, we know that air quality per se, probably, as we've learned to expect, probably stems significantly from the great smogs of London in the 50s, where I think at the time they estimated some 4,000 people died. More recent reports indicate it was probably a little more like 12,000 people died when those inversions occurred and the smog was so bad and caused so many respiratory illnesses. But we certainly do see that there are some significant victories that have occurred, and I agree they are not resilient, that they are temporary, but they are nevertheless important. Similarly, if we look at the Yarra and what we're achieving now, it is the best it's been for decades in terms of its water quality, and because of that, in part related to it, so too is the Bay. Significant progress has been made there. But Suzuki's right; these are not resilient winds. They are temporary in nature, and the losses, of course, continue to be all around us. It's hard to come to this work and not be staggered by just the blatant disregard for the dumping of waste that we have to deal with. This particular shot is a small subset of around about 2 million car tyres that are piled up out in the west of our state, and I could take you to any number of piles out there, and just as an example of the sorts of challenges we face, in illegal dumping here, and we come at these challenges as a problem in their own right, but we need to be trying to deal with them in a way which sends a really strong message, going forward about what we're not going to put up with. I suppose, again, as Murray alluded to, in coming to the business, one of the real challenges that we've faced has been the aftermath of the Brooklyn Greens residential estate out at Cranbourne here in Victoria. This particular shot is of one of the houses on the estate. You can see the cap on the landfill right there next to the lounge room. That the guy driving the water cart trying to keep the dust down could all but reach out and ring the doorbell of the house on the estate. Those hundreds of residents there, through absolutely no fault of their own, have found their lives significantly disrupted because of the methane migration from that landfill. And again, our job at the EPA, we're not into some sort of masochistic repeating, sort of beating ourselves up over this, but whether or not that is a turning point for how landfills are managed and for how people get to live and use the land of our expanding cities, that history is yet to be written. Our job is to make sure that that loss turns into a significant victory for our community and for the businesses who want to work and do that sort of work, and residents who want to go and have their homes and their families. And I suppose in a similar vein, we've tried to take on what is a fairly drastic failure out there in the Brooklands industrial estate, only about 5 or 6 kilometres from where I'm sitting today, where we find this hodgepodge of industry conducting themselves in a standard which is just not on, and the need for the EPA as the state's environmental regulator to take a stand on that, to really send a very strong message to what's acceptable. I can say draw a line in the sand. Actually, you can draw a line in the dust, and particularly on a windowsill of a house in Brooklyn, if you like. That this is not on, and we're not leaving this area until that air clears up. Now, I don't know how long it's going to take. I mean, I quite frankly don't care, but we are not leaving until it's fixed, till the roads are sealed, till the contours are reduced on the tipping sites, to some of the industries move to more appropriate areas. And I am really grateful for many of the industries who are actually taking that message and who are moving to clean up their act. But our job is to take responsibility to ensure that situations like this, which cause great suffering to communities, are turned around. Those communities are saying to us that what they want to see, firstly, is it to be fixed, but they want to know that others don't have to live that way and put up with that sort of situation. And that's our job, to try and make that happen. And I suppose my other issue is really about just, again, the waste issues for a state like this. We've got over 60 operating landfills. We produce over 10 million tonnes of waste, and in any context, that's just not sustainable for this community to keep living and working in that way. And I look at that again as just an enormous opportunity for us as a regulator and us as a community to not just admire that problem, but to find a way in which we turn that situation into the sort of success that will lead to a better way for everyone to live out there. Now, that of course is easy to say and a lot harder to do, because from the regulator's point of view, to make that, to play that part, to be able to draw success from failure, requires us to work and behave in a very different way. This particular message, which was I arrived to receive, is in this case produced by some of the residents around the old Tullamarine landfill, who had put together a fundraising event to raise $1,000 to pay for this banner to hang on the wall of the Trades Hall here in Carlton, calling for the dump to be closed, but in particular calling on the EPA to do its job. It's just simply not possible to get the maximum learning from failure without engaging very deeply with businesses and very deeply with communities. It's not easy, because these failures bring emotions and they bring anger. They bring a lot of tension with them. But we have to learn to be close to that, to rub ourselves up against it, to see it for what it is, and to draw on that energy and divert that into the solution. It works, but it requires, certainly in our case, the regulator to be much, much clearer on who it is and what it does and what it's accountable for.